Imagine growing up where this is your classroom, these are your friends, and this is your playground. My name's Alison Teal, and I was raised around the world, homeschooled by my adventure photographer parents. I always wanted to share the magic and mysteries of the cultures I grew up in. So I set off across the world with my pink surfboard to make a film series about the incredible people that have shaped my life. In each film, I team up with a local companion for a wild and comedic adventure. I'm excited to introduce you to my global family, so buckle your seatbelts and I'll be your passport to the world. One night, not so long ago, I was crossing the deserts of the Middle East with a tribe of Bedouins and thought to myself, does magic really exist? Like magic from enchanting legends you only hear around campfires. Supernatural phenomena that seems only to exist in our ancient past. So let me tell you a story, and you can decide for yourself whether you believe in magic. Legend has it that in the friendly waters of Fiji, still governed by powerful chiefs, lies an island I've always dreamed of adventuring to, an island with some of the last firewalkers on Earth. I saddled up my camel and set off towards Fiji, determined to see firewalking. But after riding a smelly camel with an attitude, I was desperate to surf. So I decided to jump into Cloudbreak on the way, one of the most famous surf breaks in the world, where they were currently holding the World Championship competition tour of surfing. Suddenly, the waves got so big that they momentarily called off the competition, and big wave riders from all over the world descended upon Cloudbreak. And of course, the reigning world champion, Kelly Slater, made it look easy. I watched with butterflies in my stomach. Should I go out there? I truly can't miss an opportunity like this. I'm gonna give it a try. Dozens of the top male surfers in the world, and a chick on a pink surfboard. This should be interesting. It wasn't all fun and games that day, and all the wipeouts I had seen started replaying in my head. As I paddled out, I noticed Slater was right behind me. Focus, Alison. Kelly Slater is next to you in the lineup. Just then, he called, "Outside! Go, Alison!" And when Slater calls you into a wave, you go. I dropped in, even shocking myself, and then got a moment of the ride of my life, until the wipeout of my life. I was thrown straight to the bottom and smashed my foot open. I surfaced for a brief second. "Are you okay?" Slater called, but I had no time to answer. Wave after wave came smashing down on me. Out of energy and air, I sunk towards the bottom and looked up just in time to see a massive jellyfish. Oh great, now I'll be stung to death. But it was so beautiful, I had a hard time being scared. And while I was next to it, I felt like I could breathe, or like it was breathing for me. Then I saw a shark out of the corner of my eye. The jellyfish drifted away, and with my last ounce of strength, I followed it. And believe it or not, that alien-looking creature guided me to the surface and saved my life. The rescue team got me back on the boat, and I cleaned up my lovely-looking leg and foot. I have a shaky recollection of Kelly Slater winning the competition.
Volcom Fiji Pro, and congratulations to the winner, Kelly Slater.
And sharing his stoke with our future generations.
What's up, kids? Kelly Slater here. I was actually just having a conversation in the water with somebody, asking them what we'd be doing if we didn't surf. It's fun, it's good life, I love it. Get in the water.
I never mentioned the jellyfish, but I had no choice in mentioning the shark when we noticed a big bite in my pink surfboard. I wasn't gonna let near death stop me from my quest to see firewalking. So I set off across Fiji to the lost island of the Firewalkers. The island was almost on the other side of Fiji, from Tavarua and Cloudbreak. To get there, I traveled halfway across Fiji on a supply boat, but on the way, a massive storm hit. And I was pretty sure my boat captain had no idea where he was going. We couldn't see land in either direction, and just when I was starting to think my Fiji trip was doomed, I spotted the mysterious island in the distance. I had heard stories of cannibalism, so my plan was to find this hammock that I heard about on the other side of the island from the village and set up home base there to get my bearings and figure out how to introduce myself to a firewalker. Hoping I had enough supplies, I settled into Home Sweet Hammock and watched my first stormy sunset. But I was unable to relax with all the eerie jungle noises. Finally, I drifted off, hoping that no animal or human would come eat me in the night. The next morning, I woke with a start. The storm had cleared and paradise was restored. Thankfully, my foot was healed, so first things first, surf. Near this island was supposed to be a secret surf break called the Fijian Pipeline. So I looked and looked all the way around the island, but couldn't even spot a ripple or any sign of a human being. Weird. I had to get in the ocean and clear my mind. There was something fishy going on. So without surf, I set off to explore the underwater life around the island. But everything seemed to be dead. Where was all the coral? I had expected a beautiful reef. Even the fish were like ghosts. It was time for a coconut break. And then I heard something. This strange sort of tribal drumbeat. Was it firewalkers? I had to go investigate. So I set off in the direction the sound was coming from. According to the map I'd seen, the village was on the opposite side of the island from my hammock, and you had to cross thick jungle to get there. Finally, I reached a clearing and saw the village below me, and church bells were ringing. That's where everyone was. So I decided to go to church and see if I could find out more about firewalking. After church, I thought the best thing to do was the good old-fashioned greeting of giving them my business card. They were fascinated with the picture of me sitting on the tusks of an elephant.
Oh, you sit on
And you sit on the tusk and it goes like that.
it's very big animal, eh?
Yeah. It's crazy, huh?
You open the mouth and you sit on the tongue.
Great icebreaker. You want to try it?
No, I don't like it.
They had definitely never seen a girl like me in their village and didn't waste any time setting up a group photo. And this is when I first met Sorelli, head of the village. I immediately asked him if he could tell me about the legend of the Firewalkers. He changed out of his church clothes, and I quickly set up my camera, hoping to capture what he was about to tell me.
The Firewalking started in Benga.
Banga was an island just across the way.
In the olden days, in the tribe of Sawau in Benga, in the village of Dakwin Benga.
And then he launched into a fantastical tale about how his people gained the power to walk on fire. The story goes something like this.
On the nearby island of Benga lived one of my ancestors who was known to his tribe as the storytelling chief. One day, the great storytelling chief told his people to bring him a gift in exchange for a story. The tribe elected a fisherman to go to the sea and bring him an eel. When the fisherman went to pull out what he thought was an eel, it turned out to be a spirit god. The fisherman decided to bring the spirit god for the storytelling chief. The chief was about to kill and eat the spirit god when the spirit god pleaded for his life.
If you let me go, kind chief, I will give you and your descendants the power to walk on fire.
The chief was reluctant and wanted the spirit god to prove it to him. So the tribe made a fire, and the spirit god spoke a lost language that the chief had never heard before, but somehow he understood.
Come, be not afraid.
And with that, the storytelling chief stepped into the fire and his destiny. The tribe watched in awe as my great ancestor, the storytelling chief, made it through the fire unharmed. The chief spared the life of the spirit god, and before the spirit god magically disappeared, he told the tribe,
I will remain living in the leaves of the trees. From there, I will always protect you.
Years later, the island of Benga intermarried with my island of Yanuda, and to this day, the people of both islands have the power to walk on fire.
That is where the Firewalking started, in that village.
So, can I see you walk on fire? He just studied me, and it was a long time before he answered.
Yes, I've left Firewalking for more than 20 years.
But I had come all this way.
Sometimes it's risky, sometimes it's very dangerous.
Sorelli explained that I would have to complete 3 quests before I could see him walk on fire. It will begin there, he said, pointing towards the ocean. And before I knew it, I found myself cruising the coastline of the island in Sorelli's small fishing boat. We finally dropped anchor, and he handed me a hammer and some nails. Then he hopped off the boat and came back with some coral.
Can you hold on to the coral?
Yeah. How do you say coral in Fijian?
Lassie.
Lasse. So we're going lasse planting.
First quest, coral planting.
Where's your bikini?
I don't have bikini.
Jellyfish!
It looked just like the one that had saved my life at Cloudbreak. Sorelli said they're friendly jellyfish.
Can we plant those too?
As I passed by my purple friend, I telepathically told him to send his species some serious thanks. I couldn't figure out how coral planting had anything to do with firewalking, but I did as I was told. He instructed me to scrape the base of the live coral, and then, using the hammer and the U-nail, secure that portion to the reef. I was officially a coral planter.
And we're gonna build an entire reef, right?
We are going to create
Create
new coral. Come
new
on.
coral. Let's go do it. Yay!
After our underwater adventure, I thought we must be good enough friends now. So I questioned Sorelli again about firewalking. He told me for my second quest, I had to bring a customary blessing of kava to the chief of the village. Kava is a root they grind into a powder and make a drink out of. I thought Sorelli was the chief, but apparently I had yet to meet the great chief of the Firewalkers. And where was I gonna get kava?
That we have to get it from the shop. It's a little bit expensive.
This was the shop. A fisherman and his family who brought supplies to the island once a week. They didn't know anything about firewalking.
No firewalking.
But they did offer to sell me this bundle of kava I'm holding. And they even invited me into their hut for an unexpected welcome dance.
Which kind of dance? Can I see?
Okay, verrai mo twist.
Jorak lagi. M-E, put the right, M-O, put the right, M-E, and the saggy on the rock, and to the hooky booky, and to the left, there's a love band.
Woohoo! We took the dance party outside so I could teach him some hula.
1, 2, 3, tap, switch. 1, 2, 3, tap, switch. 1, 2, 3. Now you want to go around like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
After our dance extravaganza, they refused to charge me for the kava. Thus, with complimentary kava in hand, I set off to meet the chief. But on the way, a massive storm hit, and I did everything I could do to protect my kava. But by then, I wasn't exactly arriving in style. And this eerie setting did not help my nerves. I went straight to sit by Sorelli, since he was the only one I knew. But as soon as I got a visual of his shirt, some of my stress melted away. And then he introduced me to the chief. All my nerves relaxed when I saw his pink rose sweater. Not quite what I'd expected for a great chief of firewalkers.
Thank you so much. You have a very beautiful island. And someday, you have to come to Hawaii, and I'll teach you how to surf. Sound good? Okay, it's a deal.
And that is how I presented my kava to the big, scary chief. Always approach life with gratitude and humor. Speaking of kava, if there's one thing Fijians love to do, it's drink kava. Word spread quickly through the village that there was kava in the house, and suddenly our scary ceremony turned into a social kava feast. Medically, kava can be used as a sedative or an anesthetic. It helps you to relax. 1 cup of kava is enough to make your tongue go numb. And after watching these guys drink, I think I know where the term Polynesian paralysis comes from.
Happy to have you in this small island. We are very grateful today. Your Cebu Cebu, you respect the village and you respect the people. I'd like to thank you very much, Inakamkalev.
Yes, I was in with the top dogs of the village. Now for sure they'd tell me more about firewalking. But first, I had to complete my 3rd and final quest. Tribal initiation.
No way.
Small serenity.
Was meeting his son my initiation? I hope my 3rd quest wasn't dependent on him liking me, because I could not get him to crack a smile.
Sorelli Jr.
Sorelli Jr.
So he's adopted.
As it turns out, Sorelli had 6 adopted kids that loved him very much. And then I got to meet the rest of them.
This is Mia.
Mia? Alison. How are you? Wow, you got a whole family.
Just when I was starting to think that was an easy initiation, Sorelli took off across the island, instructing us all to follow.
Oh wow, thank you, Mia. Got my bushwhacker here for me.
And for some reason, Sorelli invited the head priest. I caught up with Sorelli and asked where we were going. He said we had to visit the high chief of the island. How many chiefs could there possibly be?
He's a warrior chief.
We gathered outside the mouth of a massive cave. And then, to my surprise, kids and all, we headed into the cave. But Sorelli said we had to stop first so the priest could do a prayer.
Be careful, sometimes there are snakes in here. The sea snake, which is very dangerous.
On that note, we set off into the darkness.
I'm just glad we have a minister with us.
Yeah.
Why anyone would want to live in here was beyond me. But Sorelli said it was the most sacred place on the island.
Inside the cave right now.
Sorelli shined his light on the ceiling and suddenly revealed an entire crack of chirping bats. Ah! We carried on quickly, but I was starting to have second thoughts, and then everyone stopped to look at something.
What is that? Coconut?
Yeah, a skull.
That's a skull?
Well, that one?
Yeah.
That's the skull.
No way.
Yeah. And this one here is the skull.
The chief was dead.
Those are huge bones.
And from the looks of it, had been for many years. And then Sorelli suddenly turned to us, looking like a strong warrior, and began to tell the story of the chief.
They had a war in the olden days, tribal wars. We call it the Bunivalu, the war chief.
In ancient times, the head chief of my people, known as the War Chief, and his warriors went into battle with the nearby island. And in the heat of combat, his warriors had to watch in dismay as their beloved war chief was struck down and killed by the enemy chief. Since cannibalism was still rampant in Fiji, the enemy chief lit a fire and was about to eat the war chief when his beloved warriors carried him away in a canoe and rushed back to their island, searching for a place to hide the war chief's body. Because if an enemy eats your chief, he gains your land and your tribe. Suddenly, they noticed a cave and carried the war chief deep inside the perfect hiding place. There, they watched over their dead chief until all 7 warriors starved to death, loyally protecting his body.
Sorelli was such a good storyteller, we had sat down on the sharp rocks to listen.
The story is very important to us, because what those people did during that day, it is why we the people of Anura in the Northern Isles, they sacrificed themselves for the people of Serwa.
Now I understood the importance of the dead chief. Without him and his warriors, Sorelli and his family would not exist.
Thank you for bringing me here.
We paid our respects to the chief and his warriors and asked for their continuous protection.
What I think is, it is very important to visit the cave and to pass the story along. That is why I bring the children along, so that they know the story and they pass the story along.
As I came to understand, visiting the cave was a sort of initiation. It marked my acceptance into the tribe and the children's first steps into manhood and the responsibility of passing on the traditions. Once outside the cave, we said a closing prayer, and Sorelli said, "We are all warriors now." And laughing at his cheesy comment, we all grabbed the nearest stick to really feel our inner warrior. About then, I was getting pretty hungry, and if there was going to be firewalking, we were going to need a feast.
Babe!
Okay, we weren't actually going to eat the pig. We were just feeding it on the way to harvesting cassava. Cassava, or tapioca, is a key staple in the Fijian diet.
No way!
It looks like a sweet potato, and when cooked, tastes kinda, well, starchy. Sorelli won the award for biggest cassava pulled. And then Sorelli seemed to read my mind.
Do you want
Coconut.
I was dreaming of a coconut.
No way!
So the kids set off up the coconut trees, towering above us.
Nice job, you guys! That was amazing!
Oh my gosh. Really good. Oh, thank you. Natural straw. I had completed all 3 of my quests. And walking back to the village with our harvest, I wondered if Sorelli really would keep his promise to walk on fire again after 20 years. Luckily, when we got back to the village, Sorelli's wife had a fried fish dinner waiting for us.
And then we fried fish on top. Okay. And I mixed coconut milk.
We gave her our harvest, and she began to prep a meal for after the firewalking. It would be a feast of coconut fish and boiled cassava.
So who catches the fish?
My son.
Your son?
My son goes diving.
How old is your son?
He's 24.
Wow, perfect. I'm 25.
Really? That's my youngest.
Are you looking for a daughter-in-law?
Wow, I've already got 4.
If I married into the tribe, our kids could technically walk on fire. I figured I wouldn't push my luck. I ran back to my hammock that night, overwhelmed with firewalking excitement. It was all starting to kind of make sense to me. Who was I to think I would march into a village and immediately get to see some of their most sacred customs? I had completed my quests. I had contributed to the reef, paid my respects to the chief, and been initiated into the tribe. Yes! And even the sun seemed to flicker like fire. And is it my imagination, or does the moon look like it was on fire too? The next morning, I woke up to a fire burning by my hammock. Inside the fire were huge stones.
Oh, it's hot!
We added any scrap wood we could find. According to their instructions, it had to be enough to keep the stones cooking all day.
This is actually how they used to eat people in the olden days in Fiji. This was their oven. They'd build it up like a little log cabin, and then they put the person inside, right? And then cook them?
Yeah.
And then they open it and eat, yeah?
Cannibalism was a regular practice in Fiji until the mid-1800s. With that in mind, I was pretty excited when Sorelli showed up by boat and said, "I have something to show you while the stones cook. Grab your surfboard." We set off towards the horizon, and right when the island started looking tiny in the distance, I saw it. The Fijian pipeline. I was out there so quickly that I didn't even stop to think I was in the middle of the ocean alone. It was pure surf magic. And then, of course, out of nowhere, my buddy floated by. We did a sort of underwater dance. And with that, I was officially crowned Queen of the Jellyfish. I was on cloud 9. Minaka! I hopped off to help with firewalking preparations. When I arrived, the men of the village were wrapping themselves in grass skirts, coating their bodies in coconut oil, and using bottle caps to decorate themselves in a sort of war paint made from coconut oil mixed with charcoal. When Sorelli arrived, I could sense he was nervous, and it almost felt like I was helping them prepare to go into battle. Until we realized Sorelli's skirt had been made too small.
Turn around. You're the 21st century firewalker. I love it. Sorelli is about to firewalk for the first time in 20 years.
Yeah,
How are you feeling?
a little bit nervous.
Did you tell your children that you're doing this?
Yes,
They're okay. Are they watching?
some of them.
Even Sorelli Jr. came to see his beloved father firewalk. Yeah, that's about how I'd look if my dad said he was gonna walk on fire. And then it was time to make our way to the fire. They performed an opening prayer. And the ceremony began. They first moved all of the burning logs off of the hot stones. Then, using bamboo sticks, they leveled the stones to make a sort of flat surface. And then I finally understood that they were gonna walk on the red hot stones that had been burning all day. Sorelli did his best to explain to me what was going on, even though he'd been out of the business for 20 years. Suddenly, it became all about blessing the rocks with leaves. And more leaves. Then I remembered in the legend of the Firewalkers, the spirit god said that he would live on in the leaves to protect them. And then Sorelli was beckoned to the fire.
How do you feel?
Good.
I want to shake your foot actually.
Okay.
Wow, nothing.
Nothing.
Oh,
Cool.
nice job.
Satisfied.
Satisfied. You got your firewalking for the day.
For 20 years.
I'd say you've made a true friend when they agree to walk on fire for you. Then it was time for some tribal jam time. I couldn't keep up with the words, but I knew how to clap. After the ceremony, we cooled the stones with seawater. They were still unbelievably steaming hot, even hours after Sorelli had walked on them. I was so honored he had stepped up to personally prove to me the magical powers of his people. They returned to their village by boat, and I stood there with disbelief and gratitude that I had finally witnessed firewalking. But my adventure wasn't over quite yet. The next day, after church, we finally got to have our feast. Fresh fish cooked in coconut milk and boiled cassava. It was an incredible feeling to know we had all worked hard to make this meal happen. Since I had very little with me to offer back in return, I couldn't leave the island without giving them something. A little idea that had floated up to me while surfing. A tire swing made from a boat buoy. It was immediately a huge hit, and kids came from far and wide to give it a swing. I even came up with a smaller version for Sorelli Jr. and managed to get 3 smiles out of him in a row. Then it was time for a rugby game. I sat on the bleachers trying to figure out the rules. Sorelli Jr. desperately wanted to play, and when he finally got the ball, instead of throwing it to a teammate, he walked all the way down the field with it and threw it to me. Now that felt more like initiation into the village than anything else. Now that we had eaten the food, we had to replant it.
You're part of the family now, eh?
I'm part of the family now. So they're putting me to work.
Yeah.
I see how it goes.
This is very important for you to show your kids what you're doing in everyday life. One day, time will come when you, the father, will be gone. We don't want to see your kids, your family, to suffer. Because what I believe, even if there is no money in your pocket, you still can survive. Just by what the world is prepared for you. Trees, the cassava, the water, the ocean. This is what is there already before you come into this world. You have to believe everything is there for you. So important. You have to believe.
That's it. Dude, I'm a tapioca planner.
The kids put on a performance for me with a whole variety of dances. And then with everyone watching, Sani and I decided to show them the sacred dance we had been practicing.
Right hand in, put your right hand up, put your right hand in, and shake it on the right, and do the hokey pokey, and turn it around. This
It was a big hit, and of course, everyone wanted a group photo.
1, 2, pull up!
Their happiness was contagious.
I think there's a secret in living a happy and good life.
We did it.
Not only money. Because if you go for money, sometimes you are not sleeping very well. It makes you stress.
Fiji!
All these things surround you to have a happy life, your friend, your neighbor, the trees around you, the grass, the water. Those are all things that will make you happy. Even if I don't have money, I still happy living in this island. So come one day, come to another.
Before I could leave, we had one more important mission to complete. Checking the growth of our coral. In the weeks I'd been there, the little sprigs of coral we had planted had blossomed into beautiful coral heads. We created an underwater coral farm grid so the kids could help him keep up the reef after I left.
Because healthy coral will attract healthy fish. And healthy fish will make healthy people.
I was excited to come back someday and see it full of coral.
Also, you have to be open hearts. Open heart. Yeah. Open heart. So that is what I believe that can make you happy. You open your heart. So simple.
And now I was happy, especially to know that Sorelli would continue to pass on his stories.
When Alison asked me to walk again, at first I feel a little bit nervous. Later on I got the courage. I believe that I can walk on fire. I really believe.
Hopefully it wouldn't be another 20 years until the next generation of firewalkers shared their magic. Leaving the island was not easy, especially when all the kids came to perform the goodbye song. I hopped on a huge fishing boat heading for who knows where, so wrapped up in the emotion of the moment. I never thought I'd be so sad to leave an island of such threatening, firewalking cannibals. Look it up, There was one thing I knew for sure. Times like this, you never really know what to expect in life. I know I will continue to pass on the stories. Not just Sorelli's stories, but my stories, and my parents' parents' stories. And I think I'll start to ask more people about their stories, and open my heart to a world of potential magic. Where would my adventures take me next? I guess the horizon is my limit.